Because to me, that's the feeling of home. You know, like I know a lot of people are like, oh, I hate that. But you know, when you've lived in Connecticut for 25 years, that's when I know that I'm back in my place, you know, whenever I feel that. And so, yeah, it's been fun. You know, like you mentioned Gulf Shores.
How was that?
I don't know when the last time was that I was, you know, down there at the beach, so to speak. I didn't actually get to the beach on this trip, but you know, when you live as far away as I do, yeah, it's been a while. It was great. So that group was actually, that's the only group I've spoken to that was not strictly an Alabama group. That's a group of fans of they're just college football fans.
Sure.
And they get together and they talk about their teams and everything. And so that was fun because it was from a little bit different angle where it wasn't all about Alabama.
So it wasn't 95% Bama.
No, and it really wasn't. I would say, I think they said on a normal night, it's a little bit more than 50% Alabama. But on that night, it was less than 50%. So it was a good crowd.
All right, Brad Edwards was with ESPN for 25 years. He's got a new book out, Dynasty by the Numbers, on Alabama football under Saban. And he was in Gulf Shores Monday and Jackson, Bama last night. Did you have a weird off-the-wall question either Monday night or last night from a spectator?
Off the wall. I don't know about off the wall. You know, you get all sorts of questions about name, image, and likeness. That's been a popular one lately. And, you know, someone did ask about kind of what are some of the problems that you're starting to see with it that maybe people didn't see? Because every time changes are made, there seem to be unintended consequences, you know?
Bumps in the road.
And I think everyone knew that there would be some of those. And I thought it was a great question, even though it was the first time I'd ever gotten it, because of some things that I witnessed this past weekend. You know, when Bo Nix was getting booed by the Auburn fans, when the Oklahoma fans were chanting the name of the backup quarterback, you know, I mean, Spencer Rattler was the preseason Heisman favorite. They still haven't lost a game, by the way, for whatever that's worth. And they're chanting the name of the backup quarterback. Obviously, DJ Uiagalelei at Clemson not having the type of year that Trevor Lawrence and Deshaun Watson had before him. And so it just kind of hit me like, hey, you've got all these pressures that have always been there when you're following in the footsteps of really great players before you, and you're in these, you know, these programs of the highest visibility that are competing for national championships. And so you are always going to have that element of fan unrest when things aren't going well. And as the quarterback, you're going to take more than your fair share of the blame for it. Sure. That's not new. But what is new is that you've got Bo Nix contractually obligated to go on a radio show on Monday, which he does every Monday of the season. You know, he's got different sponsors, you know, that he's kind of the face of. Spencer Rattler has been given at least one car by a car dealership out in Oklahoma.
Right.
And you know, they kind of use him as the face of their car dealership. And so you've got this layer that's now on top of all the other pressure these guys are feeling. It's not just that I'm letting the fans down, but it's that these businesses that have invested in me, I'm letting them down.
Right.
And so
different dynamic.
And there's always the possibility that this is going to lead to, you know, to increased stress and I mean, in a very unhealthy way for college players. But I think when you put this on top of all that, you know, then this is something at a level that we've never seen before. And I just hope we don't have any horror stories because of it, because as different teams start to see their seasons go down the drain, you're going to have guys who have received money from companies because they expect them to be better players than what they're showing, and they're going to get even more pushback from the fan base because of it.
I mean, Bo Nix could have radio obligations all the way throughout the season as the backup quarterback.
Could, yeah. And look, I guess the radio station could opt to not bring him on.
Restructure, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they could do that, but he signed an agreement, and if they want to continue to have him on, he has to come on.
And maybe TJ
And
Finley
by
this
the
week.
way, I believe the first question he was asked on Monday is, what was it like to be benched? Can you imagine? But I mean, because you're in the business, if you had a deal with the Ole Miss or State quarterback to come
Sure.
on your show every week, and that happened, you have to ask that question.
Yeah.
You're not serving the listeners of your show if you don't ask something similar to that. Maybe you wouldn't have asked as directly as they did.
Was it on Jocks?
But no, I think it was on the next round,
Okay.
which is the Dunaway and Brown Taylor.
Okay.
You know, that show. It used to be on Jocks.
I got you.
Yeah. So, but yeah, that's an element of this name, image, and likeness.
No
It's
doubt.
just
De'Aaron King got a lot of money. He's not playing well.
No. Yeah. And so what do you do? I mean, of course, the truth about college football is by the end of the season, how many fan bases are really happy with their team's performance? Like, more of them than not are disappointed,
Right.
You know,
One or two.
And so it's almost inevitable that the majority of these guys that are getting these deals are going to, in some way, disappoint people who've invested in them.
What's the website for your book?
The book is at BamaDynastyBook.com.
Okay.
And a lot of people, you know, they hear book and they go to Amazon. It is not on Amazon.
Okay.
You can only get it on that website if you're looking for it online, BamaDynastyBook.com.
All right, cool. So BamaDynastyBook.com. All right, Brad Edwards on the Out of Bounds Show. Something that you just mentioned, a lot of these guys are following guys that were really, really good. Matt Corral's not.
Yeah.
And so there is kind of something to that, right? I mean, living up to what Oklahoma's done the last 15 years at the quarterback position, what happened with Trevor and Deshaun prior to DJ, you know, he doesn't really have to face that.
No, he doesn't. Now, at the same time,
and Bryce Young.
Yeah. I mean, at the same time, you know, Ole Miss had some good quarterbacks fairly recently. It's not like it's been forever since Ole Miss had production at that position.
Chad Kelly, Bo Wallace.
And you know, even Tamu was a good quarterback. You know, so it's not like they've had a drought there. But you're right. They didn't have, like in the case of Spencer Rattler, the three guys before him finished first, and second in the Heisman voting. You know, in the case of Bryce Young, the three guys before him all started day one in the NFL this season.
Right.
And so, yeah, Matt Corral is not having to deal with that. But, and look, and that maybe that allows him to play a little more loosely, which seems to be his style. I can't imagine the guy playing uptight anyway.
Right.
And yeah, he's such a good fit with Kiffin, too, which is kind of just funny because Kiffin didn't recruit him.
Right.
You know, but he inherited him. But at the same time, just seems to be the perfect fit for what he's got going. And I can't wait to see Ole Miss finally get tested. And, of course, this is the ultimate test, playing Alabama. And if Alabama's not the ultimate test, it's Georgia. But that, you know, that's one of these things. I'm sure you've talked about it just from watching the first 4 weeks of college football. I don't think there is a team outside of the SEC that can win the national championship this season. You know, and like I think back to the last time that we might have said, hey, it's possible that the three best teams in the country are all in the SEC, or maybe three of the top four. In 2014, when both Mississippi schools were near the top of the first BCS standings, I guess, not BCS, the playoff rankings. State was number one, right? State was one, and Ole Miss was three, and Alabama was maybe four. Or was it Auburn? Auburn might have been up there too, but there were four SEC West teams that were like in the top six, and you would have had conversations similar to that season. But the reality is there were also other good teams in that mix. I mean, of course, the national championship game ended up being Oregon against Ohio State. There wasn't an SEC team in the championship, which, by the way, is like one of only like 2 times in the last 20 years or something like that. I mean, almost 20. I don't know what, 15 years.
Texas
or something.
and Southern Cal, and who's the other one?
Well, I'm
Ohio
trying to
State,
think.
Miami. There's been a few.
No,
but
right. I mean, going back to, I mean, since that Texas USC game, that might be the only national championship game that didn't have an SEC team. And it came in a year when the SEC was really good. But this is different because Ohio State is struggling.
Yeah.
Clemson's out. I mean, they're done. I think the whole ACC is out.
Right.
Oklahoma is really struggling. Notre Dame is not very good.
Right.
Oregon, even though they won at Ohio State, Their other games, they've looked shaky. And so, look, I mean, I know everyone is, well, I should say everyone, but the polls have Alabama and Georgia as a clear top two.
Right.
You know, and that's fine, but I wouldn't be surprised if we actually had a way of knowing such a thing, if the third and fourth best teams in the country weren't also in the SEC. Because I think Ole Miss is at that level. We'll find out on Saturday whether I'm right.
Right.
But I think they're at that level, maybe not in overall talent, but just because their offense is so good. I think they're tough for anybody in the country to beat. And I think they would beat most of the teams that are ranked ahead of them.
I agree.
And Florida, based on what they did against Alabama, could be in that category too. We'll know more when they play Georgia and see them against the rest of the SEC. So it is one of the subplots to this game is that whoever wins on Saturday between Alabama and Ole Miss, I'm not saying it's smooth sailing because you still got to go through the SEC, but you're in a position where you got a really good chance already after, a couple days into October, just serious inside position to be in the SEC championship game. And this could be a year where if you just get to the SEC championship game without a loss, you're probably in the playoff, whether you win that game or not. So there's a lot riding on this game, which is not something that you can say with confidence very often in early October.
Brad Edwards on the Out of Bounds show, his new book, Dynasty by the Numbers, on Nick Saban's run as the Alabama football coach. And it's storytelling through numbers. Super book. You can go to BamaDynastyBook.com. Bama Dynasty. Oh, thank you, Blake. Let's hold that up. BamaDynastyBook.com. And it's a great-looking book. Great for family or clients and so on. So BamaDynastyBook.com. If Ole Miss loses this weekend but goes 11-1 because of what you just described outside the SEC, may still be an opportunity, Brad, to grab the fourth spot.
I think this could be the biggest test for the selection committee yet, as far as how willing are they to literally take the four best teams as opposed to what they might consider the best resumes, right? And because there will be champions of the ACC, the Big Ten, the Big 12, and the Pac-12. And so based on their guidelines, that matters, that you're a conference champion, even if those conferences aren't as good as the SEC. But they're also supposed to look at strength of schedule, okay? And if Ole Miss has beaten everybody in the SEC, now granted they won't play Georgia or Florida, which might end up being what comes back to bite them.
Right.
But
Vandy and Tennessee from the East is not.
Yeah, it's not ideal for building that schedule strength. And look, I mean, so much of this is going to come down to, where does A&M end up? Where does Arkansas end up? Where does LSU end up?
Right.
How good do those wins look? I mean, if we're assuming they win the rest of the games,
right?
How good do those wins look at the end? So I think there could be a situation, depending on if you have like 2 lost champions in some of these other leagues, where you could have maybe an undefeated team and 2 one-loss teams, or you could have 3 one-loss teams in the SEC. And the committee, for the first time, has to ask the question, not are we going to take 2 from this league, but are we going to take 3? And, of course, you got to consider the context, which is this is on the heels of this expanded playoff talk where everyone is in a panic over the idea that this 12-team model, you could have 5 SEC teams in there. And so the committee, I don't think, would want to do it.
Right.
Because they'd be sending the message that would basically validate the fears of everybody in college football of what the expanded playoff would become. But at the same time, if you wanted to kind of light a fire under the playoff expansion and say, hey, we got to do this ASAP, no better way to do it than put 3 SEC teams in a 4-team playoff.
Brad Edwards on the Out of Bounds show. Isn't it crazy that Ole Miss could have a monster season and be the way the game has changed compared to when you and I were growing up at Veterans Memorial Stadium when games were 16-10.
Right.
Okay.
Well, and now
we totally
even 10
flipped.
years ago. I mean, think about Alabama, LSU.
That's true.
2011.
9-6. Sure. But what you and I grew up with, and you're right, to a certain extent, just shifted the last few years. And they could have an average D, but be so explosive on offense that they could win their way into the discussion of the college football playoff.
And that's where we are. And that's why I think they could be one of the 3 best teams in the country, is just because from what I see, they're going to be that difficult to stop on offense. Now, you always have to look at the recent Oklahoma teams. And while defense might not win championships anymore, you have to reach a certain level on defense in order to be able to win games. Like it's kind of, to put it in tennis terms, you got to be able to break serve every now and then, you know. And in college football today, that doesn't mean force a 3 and out. You know, any punt from anywhere on the field is a great job by the defense. Or
a field goal.
That's the other thing. I was going to say, forcing a turnover obviously is better than forcing a punt, but even holding a team to a field goal. And then this is, to me, this is something to watch in the first half on Saturday, because Kiffin is obviously aggressive. He will go for it on 4th down from just about any spot on the field, and will go for it on 4th and 4, 4th and 5. He doesn't care. He's into the analytics, and I admire that, because I think it's the right way to play.
Right.
Especially when you might not have quite as much talent as your opponent in this case. He's going to put the pressure on Alabama, whereas Saban, I cannot see Saban in the first half of any game going for it on 4th and 3 in field goal range. He's going to trot the field goal kicker out there. And if you have an Ole Miss touchdown followed by an Alabama field goal and another Ole Miss touchdown, now all of a sudden Saban's decision to kick the field goal, which is just instinctive for him because he's a defensive-minded coach and he's done that all his life. Now they're playing from behind, you know, that they've got to get a service break in order to get back in it. And so now look, I mean, obviously there's a risk involved in going on 4th down. You could end up with no points instead of 3.
Right.
But I think that's something to just watch out for on Saturday. If Ole Miss goes for it, actually, it doesn't even matter. Like, if they go for it and get it, or maybe they don't even get it in a 4th down, but if they're scoring touchdowns and early in that game Saban decides to kick a field goal instead of answer with a touchdown, it's a long game, but at the same time, I don't think the defenses are going to get a lot of stops on Saturday.
Brad Edwards on the Out of Bounds show in the Modelo guest line. All right, let's switch gears. We got about 3 minutes here, maybe 4. You were with ESPN for 25 years, all into the world of college football. And now you just wrote a book, Dynasty by the Numbers. And tell our listeners about what, if they get it, what they can expect.
Yeah, so what I would say for those listening, obviously there are a lot of people listening who are not Alabama fans. But if you know Alabama fans, you know, if they're in your family or you have friends or have a client who's an Alabama fan, it's a great gift. Okay, as we're inching closer to the shopping season for Christmas and all that. And the book is about how dominant Alabama has been in the Saban era, specifically starting 2008. And then looking at the last 13 years, or if you want to go 12 years, they've won 6 national titles in the last 12 years. It's not a book that you read. It's filled with charts and graphs to give you visually a perspective on where Alabama has been compared to everyone else in the sport. And just 2 quick examples. These are some things that I updated from the book that I just put on social media this week. Actually, after Saturday's game, and this will be a fun subplot to keep up with in the first quarter with the Ole Miss game. Alabama has not trailed at any point in its last 53 quarters of play. It was the 3rd quarter of the Georgia game last year. So they've gone 13 full games plus 1 quarter without ever trailing, even 3-0, 7-0. They've never been behind on the scoreboard. It's the longest streak since 1950 for any team to not trail, okay? And so I tweeted that out on Saturday night, and I had an Alabama fan tweet back at me. He said, we better win the coin toss and get the ball first on Saturday because that streak's going to come to an end, or at least it could. And then another one.
Kiffin will take the ball. Go ahead.
And another one I tweeted on Sunday after the poll came out. Alabama's now been ranked number 1 in 104 of the last 208 AP polls. So 50% over 208 polls. That is by far the longest stretch for any team to be ranked number 1 in half the polls. The second longest, Pete Carroll's USC teams were ranked number 1 in 42 of 84 polls. We're talking about 84 versus 208. That's how dominant this has been. And the book is it's filled with information like that to just give you extra perspective, well beyond winning 6 national titles in 12 years. Other numbers to just kind of quantify how dominant Alabama has been during this stretch.
BamaDynastyBook.com. BamaDynastyBook.com. You probably hadn't had a lot of LSU buyers.
No. We have had a shortage of book purchases in the state of Louisiana for a while.
I saw your post.
For a while,
Facebook.
it was the lone holdout in the deep South was the state of Louisiana, but I've had a few since then. There are Alabama fans down there, but I think they were censoring the internet to make sure they didn't find out about it or something to that effect.
BamaDynastyBook.com. We got a minute or so. What was it like? I mean, writing the book, like the process.
Yeah, it was fun because it required research. Like there were a lot of things that I had to just dig into, things that I didn't already know. And I thought there was going to be something there. And then in some cases, it turned out to be way better than I expected it to be. And then on top of it, look, I spent the last 25 years just studying and talking about college football. I never had to do anything resembling business. I self-published this book, so I had to learn about the publishing business. I had to learn about taxes and things like that as far as running a business. And so it's been a lot of fun.
Brad Edwards on the Out of Bounds Show. Find his book, BamaDynastyBook.com. That's BamaDynastyBook.com. Brad Edwards on the Modelo guest line. We'll see you tomorrow.